Welcome to the Nikki Starchild Show. I'm Nikki Starchild, your host. Today we have an incredible guest, Stephen Bassett, a political activist, disclosure advocate, and the executive director of Paradigm Research Group. Paradigm Research Group has been fighting since 1996 to end the government's embargo on the truth about extraterrestrial phenomenon. Stephen has spoken globally about disclosure, the formal confirmation by world leaders of an extraterrestrial presence. With over 1,200 media interviews, he's a leading voice on the political implications of UAP and ET phenomenon. PRG's work has been featured on major networks and in top publications. In 2013, Paradigm Research Group organized the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure. And in 2014, they injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. Fast forward to 2023, and Stephen co-founded the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, bridging UAP and ET researchers with the global entertainment industry. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Stephen Bassett. Thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure, Nikki Starchild.
This is the first episode of the Nikki Starchild Show. Mm-hmm. So everyone, myself, we're beyond excited. We have a lot of questions from Twitter directly. We have questions from my live chat audience that we daily have in the morning for Good Morning UFO.
Good.
So we talk about the topic every single day, Monday through Friday. Really? We get deep into the deep dives. Yes, a lot of different things accumulated for this creative project to emerge. And now we have the Nikki Starchild Show, which this will be premiered on a Saturday night somewhere. So primetime hour on the weekend. Yeah. So lots of the viewers, Twitter followers, friends, ufologists that I know have these questions for you. So I hope you're ready.
Yeah. Fire.
Awesome. So one of the first questions that we got is, when did you first come across hashtag UFO Twitter?
Twitter was launched in 2006. And like most people, I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, there had been social media out there. I think I was on Facebook by then for sure. So it was after that. I don't think it was long, right? So I signed up. The exact year I can't remember, but it was not long after 2006. Could have been 8, but the latest. And it was what it was. I didn't fully appreciate its activist power until later. And then I began to realize, whoa, this is something special. This is not Facebook. It's not LinkedIn, which was established, but which is really about networking for people to find employment and make business connections and other things like that. Whereas Facebook is more this social thing. Twitter, the way it's designed, is just the perfect activist tool. And as I found that, I said, I got to start getting followers. And so, and I've been using it ever since. and not surprisingly, the UFO issue, the UAP issue, embraced it big time. And now it is a huge part of the activist process, and will be seen as such by history. UFO Twitter, the concept of the hashtag, the concept of tagging the messages, right? At so-and-so, the bing, 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 and it goes to their notification box. Being able to search hashtags so you can see all the stuff on a particular subject, trending, all of this stuff is pure activism. So I'm devoted. I really should. I'm not a big self-promoter per se. It's not natural to me. There are a lot of things you can do to get people to follow you and come look. Ice bucket challenge, things like that. Not me. So I'm up around 34,000. But I'm starting to really promote my handle at Steve Bassett. Of course, Paradigm Research Group, a search, it gets you there as well. Because I need more Twitter followers, because literally it's directly impacts your ability to get your message out and to address issues and deal with the government. Every member of Congress, except for 2, has a Twitter handle. Almost all of the journalists have a Twitter handle. And a lot of people don't realize that you can always message them by doing a tag. If they have a DM, and most do not, you can message them directly. I have a DM. I want people to message me, but you can tag them. And so this is a big deal. And I'm doing Twitter Spaces now. My friend Danny Sheehan did one the other day, had 1,000 people on it. My phone is not really the best, so I was having terrible troubles. But now you can do it on your PC. So all my new Twitter Spaces will be on my PC. And so again, what can I say? Twitter is my friend. I don't care who owns it, except whoever owns it, I want them to keep it going, right? Keep it up, manage it, keep it going. And because we don't want to lose this. This is a wonderful thing.
Yes. So would you say more radical speech you like?
More radical what?
Like, what do you think about Elon Musk and Alex Jones getting reinstated and being able to be on Twitter again? Just
that is outside my strike zone, my dear. Who gets on and who doesn't get on, and who has the speech limits? That's not my area. I leave that to others to debate, discuss at length. My issue is pretty well defined. Ending the truth embargo on the ET presence. And that's more than enough to keep me busy.
Fantastic. So here's another question that came in from Twitter. So the National UFO Record Center, right? It has the largest cases. The new, it's located, or David Marler here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is setting up the National UFO Record Center. And he has the largest collection of cases and official documentations, blue book in the world, looking for federal funding right now. He's looking for federal funding to digitize all. And he recently did a presentation to Kirtland Air Force Base as well. And so in the post-disclosure world, how do you see UFO history helping with the acclimation of this topic to the public?
Well, it's huge. It's great that David, also Jeffrey Kripal at I think Rice University, is also starting an archive. There are a few others. There are several. I think David Marler is ahead of the curve. I think he's very professional. And if he can get some serious funding, then his may dominate. You've also got the Black Vault, which is essentially an archive of documents that's been put together for the last 25 years. So there is, and also thanks to the internet and the web world, that everything we're doing is documented. The Wayback Machine, which again, so it's not going to fade away. It's going to be well covered by history. The one concern I have is that there certainly are people motivated within the national security structures to destroy evidence, to destroy stuff that they would prefer not come out. That's kind of true of other issues. It's not just us. But this issue probably is, I think, more historically significant than any other that I'm aware of. And so hopefully that's not happening. It's worth noting, well worth noting, that in the original UAP Disclosure Act submitted by Senator Schumer and Rounds, and which was kept in the reduced version of the act, which was turned into an amendment of about 11 pages in single space, whereas the other was like 37 in single space, that the idea of preserving records and not destroying records was included in both. So it's up. They're the government is not stupid. They know how important this issue is. They know how important the history of it is. And so I think there will be very legitimate efforts to preserve as much as possible. The truth embargo is a policy that some will consider righteous and others would not. But it is one of the most extraordinary things any government has ever done. And we need to understand every aspect of it for historical purposes and also to prevent doing it again. I don't think I want my government to ever do this again. So I think overall the sentiment inside government is to preserve. And they have full classification and secrecy, so it's not as if people are, but they're starting to sense the world's coming to them. You know, it's like the true embargo's days are numbered, and eventually they're coming. You know, but I again, overall, it's national security. It's always been national security, and there's some public relations problems there that are significant, but they'll manage them. So I hope that most people will realize that history overall will be more generous to them, the truth embargo managers, than say the public will in the early days of the post-disclosure era. So this history has got to be preserved, and we're doing it. But obviously, the government has the resources to do it extremely well, which is why in the UAP Disclosure Act, there was this substantial, I mean, there was this whole thing called the Controlled Disclosure Plan, which a lot of people jumped up on the word control. Here they go. No, they could have called it the Managed Disclosure Plan, in which they show how all of it will eventually move up through, provided to the public and archived in the National Archives. All of it, everything, eventually, not right away. But there will be materials and documents released very quickly, and so there will be a flow of information that'll go over a period of time, several years, and that was all set up in that bill, and sort of it's somewhat maintained. It is maintained in the final bill, but all the enforcement power has been stripped out for now because they're still a little twitchy. You know, they're still a little worried, and I get it. But it was a brilliant move by Senator Schumer because he essentially smoked them out in the open. I mean, they couldn't just sit there. At least they felt they couldn't sit there and see eminent domain, subpoena power, a review board, and total top-end classification being given to oversight people. And they had to do something. So they did, which just proves what we know. It's like, yeah, it's true. They've got ET tech and the civilians have been involved. Civilian corporations are involved. So I just confirmed it. So all it did was delay it. And I will speculate now that shortly after disclosure takes place, the president confirms, they're going to reintroduce that initial bill. They'll reintroduce the whole damn thing word for word, and it might just pass. Because in the post-disclosure world, where the entire world knows, yeah, it's true, and there was a truth embargo, the concerns of these people that have been expressed recently will not be given much consideration. And the people are going to demand that they have those kinds of enforcement powers. They're going to demand this kind of regulation. And those bills will pass. And so it's not that big a delay if we get disclosure quickly. And of course, that's what's on the table now.
Oh, and it's so amazing what's going on. I think this comes from one of our viewers on YouTube who's frequently in the chat, hides in long grass. And this was an interesting question for a lot of different reasons, because a lot of people always repeat over and over, Steve, that it's like, where's the evidence, right? Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence?
Yeah. And
I think you and I feel great about answering that question. But however, that comes up quite a bit. So Hides in Long Grass's question was, what is evidence, right? And how do we define evidence? And where is the evidence? Was just all three of those questions is what he put out there.
Evidence, where is the evidence, has been one of the touchstones of the truth embargo. In other words, the government is basically saying, when they use that phrase, we have everything under control. We have things underground. massively classified, protected by armed guards, and so forth. So if you want to know where the evidence is, we got it. Okay, can we see it? No, you can't. So that's one way to respond to it. The evidence for the extraterrestrial presence is in the several thousands of books that have been written about it in the last 70 years. The documentaries that have been made, that files and docs that have actually been revealed, some of which are archived, some of which are not formally archived. Millions of sightings, hundreds of thousands of contactee reports from people that are being directly engaged by ETs, hundreds of thousands of them. But what most people want is they want a, as it was once said, we want to see a latrine from a flying saucer. The government has the vehicles. Grush confirmed it. Chuck Schumer confirmed it. The pushback against the eminent domain confirmed it. Plenty of other witnesses have come forward and said we have vehicles, right? And so the evidence is all around us. It's a massive, it's accumulative. And so the answer to the question is it's just look for it. You can't miss it. And what's going on with people like that is they're not looking for it. They have no intentions of looking for it. And all they want to do is just not have to deal with it. And that makes it easy. And number one on the list of those people is the esteemed Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who one day is going to have to explain his position on this issue, his statements on this issue. And I don't want to have to be his public relations representative. He wants a couple of $100,000 to speak and continues to act as if what happened? Nothing happening, right? So he is one of the leading where's the evidence people, but there are others. And I'll be honest with you, the people that are deeply involved in this field, we really don't care. We really don't care how bad they're missing the quote evidence. They are rapidly becoming completely irrelevant to the history that is unfolding. And that's their decision, right? What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loss, right? I mean, you can look into this topic and turn the other way, or you could look into this topic and just be thrilled about the next step of humanity. I mean, I couldn't agree more.
I mean, thrilled is not what we're seeking. What you're seeking is, can you be convinced? The word believer, for instance, was an epithet that was developed in the truth embargo to describe to people that believe things without evidence. You're called a believer. To me, that's an insult. That's like the N word, right? You don't hear it much anymore. But it's never been about belief. It's about being convinced. It's like asking a scientist, do you believe in gravity?
Right.
So the evidence is what matters. The evidence that convinces people of the validity of this issue, not evidence for every little aspect of it. There's so much that has to be sorted out, so much more we need to know. But the presence of extraterrestrials is simple. It's trivial. It's not like quantum mechanics. They're either here or they're not, right? It's like either the guests have arrived for dinner or they haven't. And so if the room is empty, the guests haven't arrived. But if the room is filled with people, the guests have arrived. It's that simple, right? And it's always been that simple. But the truth embargo has successfully made it so much more unnecessarily complicated and in every way obfuscated the issue, so that 76 years after Roswell, we still have scientists going on TV going, where's the evidence? What can I say?
I love how you just said that, it's an insult to you to be called a believer. Is that kind of what you said? Oh, I love that. Thank you so much.
I'm not going to attack the person. I will, and I never say that. What I say is, if somebody uses believer in my presence, I simply say, I'm convinced by the evidence.
Right.
That's why I do what I do. I'm convinced by the evidence.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to put that in my back pocket now.
File that away.
Well, because that's a true thing, is you have to be convinced. And so much of the time when people are convinced, people are dismissed very quickly on this topic. I think a quote I heard from the recent Tucker Carlson interview was, this is just too far out and the public couldn't handle it. That's what Tucker Carlson said. So that actually segues into another question that a viewer from YouTube had. And that was, how do your family and friends react to the topic? And how have you survived the stigma to keep going and not let that get in the way of your mission, your goal, your work, your research that you've put into this?
That is a legitimate question. I have one longtime friend that absolutely doesn't believe any of it, and obviously I have many friends that do. My longtime friend, to be fair, knew me way back. I mean, decades before I got involved in this. But and my family doesn't care. I don't have much of a family. It's very limited. I'm not a family guy. I have a sister. She loves me, and it doesn't matter to her whether they're here or not here. I have but again, I don't have I don't have an extended Italian family that I have to sit down for Christmas dinner with and be attacked, because of my crazy beliefs. I don't have that problem at all. In terms of dealing with the stigma, that is very interesting. The truth embargo, and this is not only true of this issue, but others. The truth embargo, literally in our country, which is a democratic republic with a lot of rights, has survived based upon stigmatizing the people in the issue, which is not nice. It's just not nice. It's not fair. It's wrong. Is it against the law? Probably not. But you stigmatize the issue. You stigmatize the language, like UFO. You stigmatize the people, and you've actually ghettoized them. I call it intellectual ghetto. You've made it hard for them to be heard. You've made it hard for them to get any traction, get media coverage, and all that. Right? You isolate them. Right? That's why you put people in ghettos. So the rest of the people in the town will not have to encounter them. They're out of the way. So whatever their problems are, they're irrelevant. That's how the truth embargo works. So if you have, for most of the last 70 years, if you have a family, if you have a business, certainly a career, particularly the kind that have credentials like lawyers and doctors and so forth, and you want to go into this issue, you're going to have a problem. All right. And so you don't. And so over the last 76 years, every year, more and more people became convinced that there's an ET presence, but they wouldn't engage it. Some would, but vast majority wouldn't, because again, I can't risk it. I can't risk my business relationships. I can't risk my career as a doctor, and on and on. In other words, the government has basically ghettoized you, whether you know it or not. But the number of people that figured it out kept growing and growing and growing. But still, as of 1996, not a single person had registered as a lobbyist on this issue because there was no money in it. And what good was it going to do for their lobbying career? So this is where people like me come in. And this is not unusual. At the point that I made the decision, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And I knew full well how it was treated, so forth. I was perfectly prepared. One, no near family. Nobody depended on me in any way. No dogs, no cats, no fixed really address in a sense. So that I was literally free to do it. It couldn't damage my life. In fact, it could only make it better. I just really hadn't done much in my life. I'd just been wandering through life, going from day to day, like a lot of people do. But I did have some gifts that I wasn't using, and so I had nothing to lose. And so when I entered and registered as a lobbyist, believe me, while others would have said, "Oh my God, I can't do that," I was going, "Oh, I can't wait to do that." Now, and you will find that in the activist movements, you have a lot of that happen. People that go in and take on these issues that have been ridiculed and demeaned and made taboo are people that don't have much to lose. and they say, I can do this, right? Nobody's going to get hurt but me. And I was one of those people. Now, we need a society that isn't that way, and it's getting better. We need a society that encourages activism, promotes it, supports it. You want activists, right? And we need a society that does never allows a government to ghettoize people or issues. And by that, I mean legitimate issues. I mean, there are some things that have to be contained, and we know about that because they can be violent, they can be destructive. But in terms of the idea of like ghettoizing people that are being impacted by the massive accumulation of evidence for an ET president, that's unacceptable. And so hopefully we'll learn from this. So this has been the best 26 years of my life. And I've gotten very modest amounts of ridicule, modest amounts of trolling. But I will say this. I deliberately set out to avoid as much of that as I could. And not everybody does that. Some activists go about their activism in a way that just invites blowback, pushback, attacks, and things like that. It's just a matter of how you go about it, the language you use. So I made a number of decisions in the early days that, by and large, I've kept to. One, don't hide anything. Don't hide from the government, because you know that you're pushing on something that they control and don't want to be bothered. Because one, you can't really, though if you're extremely gifted at hiding, I suppose you can, and some of these kind of people turn up in movies, but don't hide from the government. I don't care if they tap my phone. I never used any encrypted calling. Only reason I added it not too many years ago was because some people wouldn't call me unless they could do it that way, but I didn't do it for my benefit. All right. So if the government knows everything you're doing and you're not hiding anything, then there's no reason for it to be paranoid. It kind of knows what you're doing. You're not surprising. So that minimizes the paranoia that they feel. And then one, do not argue with people in social media. Ever. Do not argue with people on social media. Present information, maybe correct the odd fact, but debating on social media is an absolute waste of time and doesn't help anybody. All it does is create enemies and division. And so I don't do that. Be positive. Well, let me put it this way. Be fundamentally positive, but if the negative needs to be pointed out authentically. All right? Don't try to, overstate it too much, but there's plenty of negative out there, and there's plenty of negative associated with this issue. So these are decisions I made to minimize and make it as comfortable as possible to be operating as an activist on an issue that the government says doesn't exist at all, right? And I have some cool things that I'm going to put out one day. I have a fax from the Washington Post from I think it was the editor of the style section. And I contacted him about an article and said I'd love to come in and talk, because the Washington Post is a very important paper. And I got a fax back. This is fax, and it's a very short fax. It says, Mr. Bassett, if you can bring an alien in to sit down and talk with us, we'll talk to you. Otherwise, no. I have that. I'm going to be posting that eventually. I just need to, it's a little hard to read. I got to enhance it. But again, that's not awful. It's not an awful thing.
No, it's fun. Yes. It's a fun response. It's a positive response, right?
Well, it's sort arrogant. Of. It's ignorant.
Yeah.
and it uncovers the fact that the Post it manifests the fact that the Post is ultimately failed on this issue. They're finally getting into play, but they have failed on this issue, and they know they have, and one day they'll answer for it. But lastly, and let me tell you, this is essential, right? If you want to be an activist, well, let me put it this way. Some activism this doesn't work for, because it's the issue is so awful that you can't be anything but serious. But in many issues, the simple truth is that there's a lot of humor and you gotta see the humor in it. You gotta be able to laugh. You gotta find the humor. You gotta be able to laugh, and that makes it a hell of a lot easier. Now, I'm not suggesting this applies to all activist efforts. The activism to end apartheid in South Africa had very little humor. The ET issue is loaded with it, right? And the government's actions are loaded with humor. And there's some other activists like that. So that has helped. It has allowed me to use some gifts I have in that regard, and that's made it a lot easier. I have total sympathy for those are involved in issues so bad, so awful, so egregious that humor is not appropriate, and that's a tougher road to go.
Right. And I think that's one reason people they don't treat it very seriously when you try to talk about a topic that you're very passionate about, especially in regards to what's happening recently. To see Luna and to see Tim Burchett go and try to push for this legislation for the officials on top, and to literally be told the intelligence community, which isn't an agency, that's not any official agency, says, no, you can't have this information. A lot of my viewers, a lot of the people who follow me on Twitter have a lot of questions for you about that. I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Ask
What's
them.
going on with our government? What's going on? Why can't they tell us? There's 50% of the Pentagon budget that's unaccounted for. People, my viewers don't understand. My friends on Twitter don't understand. My UFO friends don't understand. I guess all we can do is talk about it. All we could do is try to start more activism. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a pretty broad subject there. I have to reduce it down to something manageable, and it's this. Plato in his Republic made the famous case for why democracies can't last. It's been remade many times over the centuries, and there is a certain truth to it. The nature of democracy, there's an innate aspect to the democratic approach to governing that includes its own demise, like life. In other words, life has built into it its own demise, which is, kind of a drag. Right? The symbol for that is telomeres, those little things on the ends of genes that keep getting shorter as you get older, and once they get too short, you're going to die. So, same thing with democracies. The modern democracy that was created by our Constitution is one of the better ones, but it has significant flaws, and the Constitution has not been adjusted enough. In fact, it got frozen some time ago, and as a result, that's endangered us. We haven't adapted enough to the changing times, which are changing faster than ever, and the nature of the modern world, it has things in it that earlier civilizations didn't have to address at all. I mean, we're in some pretty wild places, and so the upshot is this: in terms of the United States and its government, the United States democracy is ill. That's why they refer to government, or they refer to, forgive me, is often referred to as the body politic, which sort of identifies the government as a living thing, right? Everything, obviously, it kind of is made up of a bunch of people doing things, and it's sort of like a living thing, body politic. Well, like regular bodies, it can get sick. And like regular bodies, it can have more than one sickness at a time. You can have the flu, a cold, and multiple sclerosis all at the same time. Isn't that wonderful? Our body politic has now got multiple afflictions. And therefore, it's dancing with the risk of failure, death, right? And death in this case would be the collapse of our democratic system. And these afflictions primarily all have to do with unresolved issues. What's the word I'm looking for? Unresolved issues and and problems that are not being reformed or fixed. We're not fixing things. We're tolerating, and it's like the person that tolerates. They won't go to the doctor. They won't get a checkup. They keep getting other sicknesses. And they just refuse to go. They won't deal with it for whatever reason. Obstinacy. They're afraid of doctors. Whatever the hell. And eventually, it overwhelms them. We're not fixing things. We're not reforming. Right. What needs to be reformed? And the list is growing and growing. And one of these reforms is the abuse of secrecy in the aftermath of World War II. The abuse of secrecy has simply gone right off the charts. We classified probably billions of documents, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of programs, classify everything. It cost a fortune to maintain all of that secrecy. And under the cloak of secrecy, all kinds of abuses can take place. And so the massive abuse and prevalence of secrecy is a fundamental disease affecting the body politic. Our electoral system, our election system, has decayed and been corrupted. And that's fundamental to a democracy. And so that's another affliction we're under. So overall, and I can list others, but overall, our body politic is sick, and we're not doing enough to heal it. We're tolerating it. And in some cases, we're making it worse. And if we do not take the necessary measures to deal with each of these afflictions, it could die. Now, we're hearing lots of talk about the death of democracy, the end of democracy, and so forth. This is a pretty nebulous statement, and I wish they'd be a little bit more precise. And it's slightly overstated, right? We're not quite as on our last legs as it's being presented. And the reason for that is that there's a legitimate concern that we are in trouble. And so in order to motivate people, a lot of those that are trying to address this issue in public forums are overstating it to get people's attention. That's not unusual. I understand that. So is it fixable? You bet it is. Can we fix the electoral system? Yeah. Can we fix the gerrymandering system? Yeah. Can we tweak Congress a little bit? Yeah. There's a whole lot of things we can do that will improve our standing and the robustness of our democracy. We just don't do it. Okay, now this is where disclosure comes in. One of the many places it comes in. When a democracy, when any nation starts to flounder, when it starts to decay, when it goes on the downward slope, invariably it involves the complacency of the citizens. Whether it's the complacency or the unwillingness to confront the dictator, which is based upon some legitimate concerns, obviously, all right, but people still go out in a million at a time sometimes and protest the dictator, right? But one way or another, there's not enough citizen participation in the process of governing, and it starts to decay. And that's not unusual. It's the human nature. As people's lives get more complicated, more challenging in the modern world, right? This isn't 200,000 years ago when things were rather simple and short. No. People are tied up in that. They don't have effort and energy to give to addressing the larger context of the society they're in. And so there just isn't enough action. And if it gets too bad, then the democracy slips into totalitarianism, and then one person basically takes care of it all for you. You don't have to do anything anymore. They're going to take care of it, and you're going to do whatever they say. Disclosure will be a massive, impacting, motivating event. It will grab the attention of billions of people overnight. It will force them to rethink about their place in the world, the nature, their place in their own country, the place of their country in the world. They will be forced to literally, and want to in many cases, assess all of these things. So it initiates an age of engagement. And as I like to use now this metaphor, disclosure, think of it as a key to a door, but not a key to one door. Think of it as like the key to the master key to 1,000 doors. The kind of key that the maintenance person that services 1,000 apartment building, they have a key to every door. All right. Otherwise, they have to carry 1,000 keys around. And so disclosure is a key to 1,000 doors that we haven't been able to get through. We've been knocking on them, pounding on them, kicking on them. We can't get through. Suddenly we got the key to them. We open them up and you go through. And so now you have an age of engagement, which I think will end up being the age of reform. I think in the post-disclosure world, you're going to see more reform of the dysfunctional components of both individual nations and collective nations, geopolitical and national reforms. It will be based upon this massive engagement of people. Another way I like to phrase it, or another metaphor I use, is that in any given time, 8 billion people look in 8 billion directions, right? Something will bring them together, and a bunch of them, like 1,000 people, will get in a theater, and now they're all looking at the stage. That's good. If you're on the stage, you can talk to 1,000 people. Disclosure, in that aftermath of disclosure, in a way, all 8 billion people are going to be looking in the same direction. That's like having a theater filled with 8 billion people, and they're all looking at the stage. And so if you can get up on that stage and have something to say, you got a big audience to hear it. And so in the post-disclosure era, with everybody focused on this thing that's just happened, this unbelievable paradigm shift, the presence of extraterrestrials, they want to know everything. And so they're all looking, and it's going to allow those who are trying to explain and address issues of importance are going to have this massive audience if they can get in front of those eyeballs. And of course, a lot of people are going to try to do that. And you take advantage of that situation. Now that I have your attention, we need to solve this problem with Taiwan. Okay. Now that I have your attention, we don't want the Antarctic ice caps to melt, whatever. I mean, pick something, it doesn't matter. And so people are going to be galvanized. They're going to be electrified. They're going to be energized. And that is our opportunity to fix the problems that we face as a civilization, which are threatening our very existence and making life hell for about a quarter of the population of this planet. About 2 billion people on this planet don't have enough, either don't have food, clothing, water, or shelter, or all four. And they're miserable and they're suffering. And when people are miserable and suffering, they get angry. And when they get angry, they take action. They join terrorist groups. They act out, whatever. We have to, that's our situation. And a lot of these people are laying on the streets right now, out in front of the building. Everywhere I go, when I go out of my building, there are people sleeping on the street. There are mentally ill sitting on bus stops, screaming at the sky. And you want to know where my building is? It is 2 blocks from the nation's White House. It is 2 blocks from the home of the most powerful man in the world, head of the most powerful nation in the world, supposedly the most wealthy nation in the world. And 2 blocks, people are begging for change and sleeping in the street. So yeah, we have some serious fixing and reforming to do. And we're running out of time because we do understand that the situation is bad enough that the body politic is at the risk of dying, whether that is from its own ineptitude or from a nuclear holocaust. It doesn't matter. Death is death. And so now we have this thing that has been waiting for us to execute. Disclosure. Acknowledge we're not alone. Acknowledge we have visitors. And that for me is an incredible opportunity as an activist, because there is no other issue extent now that has the ability to affect so many other issues. You know, I mean, literally, it has an impact on everything else. So it's like it is just, you know, a wonderful thing. I mean, if you're looking for justification for what you do, and you're wondering if it's worth doing, and you think about disclosure and the impact it will have, my God, It doesn't get better than this. Not that every other activist doing highly defined issues, whether you're sailing around the Antarctic Ocean, trying to save the whales, it's all legitimate, it's all important. But this particular issue is a master key to 1,000 doors in the future of this planet.
And some of my viewers have talked about this a little bit, especially they're very upset about the 50% missing in the Pentagon budget, just the $2 trillion that are there. And you talk about just in America how frequent homelessness is. It's everywhere, right?
Mhm.
And it's almost like it gets ignored, or we say they're drug addicts or they're crazy. They're not all drug addicts or crazy.
Of course not.
Some of them are in hard times. Some of them are women running from domestic violence, all sorts of different things. So a lot of the people who are seeing this money being put in, to the Pentagon, which is fine. We all understand there's a level of black operations that has to happen. But a lot of the pushback is, if you can't tell us what this money's for, why can't we help the people in the street? If you have, this secret technology that could have helped people stay warm through the night or anything like that,
Mhm.
why have you not used this technology? Why has the government not released technology that at
Sure.
least they could release to help people, even if we have to know, we don't even have to care. Who cares about the aliens? And also show us something that you've made with that money, right? Like, I feel like there's been 70 years. We know you've been working on something. So what do you think about that? Like, a lot of people have questions with the technology. What's going on with that?
Well, there's 1,000 questions like that, and they need to be answered. But they're not going to get answered until we get disclosure. And after disclosure is when the questions begin and the public relations problems begin. And the government's doing a lot to try to mitigate the public relations problems they're going to face, which is part of why they've done all this the last few years. I'm sure most people on your list know that the U.S. government already knows about the ETs. So everything they're doing has nothing to do with finding that out. They already know it. So why are they passing all these laws and setting up Arrow and all the other stuff that's happening? Why are they doing that? Since they already know. They're doing that to prepare for disclosure. In other words, the day after disclosure, all of this apparatus, all of these laws are going to be really needed. And so they need to be in place before disclosure, not trying to scramble around and do it afterwards, which you may say, well, yeah, but our president wouldn't disclose unless we were prepared. Well, Xi Jinping could care less of how prepared we are. So this is preparation for post-disclosure. That's literally what it's setting up for. Okay, fine. And one of the reasons they're doing it is not simply to prepare to deal with post-disclosure world, but also to hopefully mitigate the people's anger about what they just did. The policy of truth embargo, 76 years. There's a lot of people that can be happy about it, but they feel that if they show good faith and do the right thing now, that people will be more generous. So it's going to help them with their public relation problem. The answer to those questions repeatedly is going to be the same thing: national security, national security, national security, national security. What are you going to say? Why?
Yeah.
In the first day after disclosure, when the briefings begin, say it's the next morning. Could be they may just do it on Friday and they'll start on Monday. Most people are going to need a week to, I don't know, drink, rest, whatever, because they're just oh God, and then Monday morning it starts, and so the press all shows up at the briefing room at the White House and over at the Pentagon and NASA and everything else. A lot of press, their hair on fire. I mean, they're going to be really intense. So the press shows up and it's time to ask some questions. And I don't know what the government thinks, but the press is not going to be going in and saying, well, it's too soon to ask that, and it's too soon to ask that. We can ask this one, that's okay. But we try to no. They're going to go in and they're going to hit them with every tough question they've got. And the questions are going to be difficult. And I'll just to read off a few. A reporter, there may be a couple of what we'll call introductory questions, just to sort of show that we're not the barbarians here to take you down. We're reporters. We're honest, ethical people. But very quickly, the question is, when did you first know about the ET presence? And the answer from the person will be 1946, 45, 43, somewhere in there, but at least no later than 47. Really? Why didn't you tell us? National security. Okay. So when did you first get these vehicles? When did you first have a non-human extraterrestrial vehicle? 47, maybe 45, 44. Why didn't you tell us? National security. Third question. Well, have you been studying this tech? Have you been re-engineering? Have you learned anything from it? And if you have, why didn't you tell us? Answer: national security. It's that simple.
I
All
just
right.
feel like we're already there.
Right. So, do you have bodies? Yes. Why don't we know about it? Why didn't you tell them? And national security. And then it starts to get really tough, because this is going to be asked in the very first briefing. I guarantee it. Whether it's the fourth question or the ninth question, 10th question, it will be the first, probably, well, depending upon how long the answers are, it'll be soon. Is the information that I am aware of, and it has been gone for some time, that these non-humans are taking humans from their rooms, from their cars, dealing with them as they wish, and then returning them? Is that happening? Answer: yes. Gulp. Whoa. Now, in that instance, all the contactees are vindicated. They'll be partying. They'll be thrilled. Okay, good. That's good. Next question. Why didn't you do something about it? Answer: there was nothing we could do. Whoa. That's a toughie. Wouldn't you agree? Okay.
100%.
How about this question? Have you had any direct formal contact with ETs? The answer to that may be yes. And that's a toughie. Now, again, formal contact can mean a lot of things. But meaning, we get together once in a while, have a drink, chat about the galaxy, what's going on, share some news, whatever. It could be that, it could be whatever. But the answer might be yes. That's a tough one. And then comes one of the toughest of all questions. It could be answered asked on day one. In any interactions you've had with extraterrestrials, did you have a deal? Did you create a policy? Did you set up some sort of program or idea or whatever? I mean, in other words, did you cut a deal with ETs so that they could abduct people without any interference from government in return for technology? In one example, could be any number of things. If the answer to that is yes, then that is going to be a major focus of the coverage immediately thereafter. I mean, it is the opinion pages of papers are going to be on fire. That is going to be a tough one. And they could say no. They could lie. And they're going to be tempted to lie because they know how tough this is. But I hope to God understand that this isn't 1969 when there were 3 news channels and some dailies, and there were still fax machines and mimeograph machines, and you could shut down Blue Book, come up with a stupid report from the University of Colorado to its everlasting disgrace, destroy NICAP, and just go, hey, we're good. No, it isn't that. You are staring in the face. When you stand in front of that mic in a briefing room, you are staring at hundreds of millions of people that have computers in front of them, access to the internet, access to each other, AI, and they can take that lie, that statement, and they can research it in about 30 minutes, dissect it, and deliver it back to you as a souffle, pointing out that you just lied through your teeth and you need to resign now. And so you're canceled before the day is over. I mean, that's what they have to understand, that post-disclosure needs to become the age of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth by government. And if you want to continue to lie, you're going to get vivisected. You're going to get chopped up like a Benny on a shrimp and served up for dinner. Don't do it. Because the truth embargo is the end of the biggest, most long-lasting lie in the history of government. Nobody has ever achieved this, I think, quite before. The dictators don't have to lie. They just say, this is what it is. If you don't like it, I'll kill you. But no, this is a real lie conducted in a republic with rights. So they're going to have to answer these questions. That is how tough it's going to be. But they will answer them. And so now to answer the larger question, the reason that we can't keep track of the money, and the reason that we're about to build a new group of nuclear submarines for $110 billion, I didn't know we needed more nuclear submarines, but apparently we do, is endemic to a much bigger problem. Right? So if people are saying, why don't they just keep track of the money at the Pentagon and give it to the poor? No, it's an endemic of a much bigger problem. How big? It's staggeringly big. Because as we enter the 20th century, in the year 1900, it's been about 12,000 years since the apocalyptic flood. Whatever caused it, doesn't matter. Whatever was going on before then, it's gone. And I don't think it was that big a deal. But after that, we started building civilizations. And that's 12,000 years ago. Very late in our existence, because Homo sapiens sapiens, with all of the, quote, mental abilities and so forth that we have, been around for 250,000 years. And we have a long history of survival and violence and whatever. And so as we started building civilizations, that history inculcated itself into civilizations. And so the 12,000 years reflected a very Darwinian survival of the fittest modality that is pretty much endemic in all of living things, with a few exceptions. And so this has been 12,000 years of what? War. 12,000 years of war. Okay? And the more people you killed, the greater you were. So Alexander the Great killed a lot of people. And so he became Alexander the Great. The reason they built a huge 7-story massive metal sculpture of Genghis Khan, it's sitting out in the middle of the Mongolian desert, is because he killed probably more people than anybody up to that date. He killed almost everybody that they encountered as he swept completely across Asia, slaughtering nations and slaughtering villages, men, women, children, cats, dogs, killed them all. So he is great. We've been doing this for 12,000 years. That has been consistent. What has changed is the technological weaponry we use. That has been advancing slowly, but inevitably all this time. 12,000 years of the technological development of weapons. And every time we had a breakthrough, another empire collapsed. In other words, if you were a nation and you didn't get the longbow before another nation did, they came with the longbows and took you over, right? If you got chariots before your enemy did, you went and took them over, and on and on and on and on and on. 12,000 years of this. And then when we get to the modern era, it's 1900. Technology, the technological evolution, the age is coming. We're seeing all kinds of possibilities, how we can build things and create things and so forth. The population was only about 1.5 billion people. I should check that, but I think I'm close.
No, I think you're completely right. I think it was much smaller, right? Because that's why the Old West, there was nothing out there. There was nothing.
I mean, I'm talking about the whole planet.
Yeah,
Let's say it's about 1.5 billion. And so what we were facing at that point ahead of us, and I think there were futurists at the time that probably sussed this out, was this: keep the population down, take advantage of this developing technology, right? Use it for the common good, and you can have a planetary civilization that's like primo. Everybody's got food and clothing and shelter, right? People feel safe. They can explore science. They can explore the arts. They can do whatever they want. They have purpose. It would be the golden century. That was inculcated. That was there, present for those that could see a little ahead, and I think some did. The general relativity was only a few years away. The breakthrough on that was only a few years away. So what did happen? We just couldn't change. And so the 20th century was the most destructive, awful century of war in human history. We outdid ourselves. We really took it to the limit. And so we've had hundreds of wars, killed hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, developed unbelievably destructive weapons, so that everybody is afraid of everybody else. Every country has got to have a border. Every country, well, if they can afford, has got to have a defense system, got to have an army, and everybody is threatening everybody else at any moment. And as a result of that, in that century, and 123 years, and I'm trying to research this. It's not easy, but let's just speculate. In modern dollars, the total amount of money that we have spent on war, equipment, bases, destruction, rebuilding, in total cost of being who we are, which is a warfaring, destructive beings that are constantly at conflict with each other, could be 300 trillion. Easy. In modern dollars, adjusted for 200 trillion, could be 400 trillion. And so if you're going to spend $400 trillion on building weapons and building armies and invading and destructing and blowing things up and having to rebuild, you're not going to have much left for health care or shelter or enough water or food for people. And then while you're spending that $300 trillion, you don't consider developing some technology that could make birth control easier, more relevant, more available. And so you let the population grow to 8 billion. And so at the end of the 20th century, we're in deep doo-doo, really deep doo-doo. I mean, in other words, we've been working our way toward that. I mean, we've done awful things and wasted huge amounts of lives and time and money and everything else, and huge amounts of human suffering that was unnecessary. But okay, it was a slow process. But after 12,000 years, we hit 1900 and we said, now we're going for the gold. We're really going to do what we do. We're going to make Genghis Khan look like an amateur. And how far did we go? We solved the nuclear atom question. We built nuclear weapons. We eventually had 80,000 of them. We put them on every form of delivery system we could. We made them so powerful they could blow up entire, almost whole areas of. I mean, the big bombs. The El Boma was the biggest of all time. That scared the hell out of people. And then we started making them smaller, but multiplied. Whatever. We created enough weapons to destroy an entire planetary civilization, and we did it between 1908 and roughly 1980. That's how we perfected what we've been doing for so many years. That is the larger issue. You can get into the granular details, and you can go at the Pentagon and want to audit them and all of this stuff, but it's being driven by something far greater than our inability to the accounting department of the Pentagon. It is inbred in civilization as we've conducted it, and we cannot change it. You still have 25,000 nukes. We're at greater risk of a nuclear war, which could just be one nuclear shell shot from one nation to another. That's a nuclear war. It doesn't have to be global, but it could become global, right? We've challenged the environment every way we can. The environment's starting to collapse underneath us. What can I say? It's not invincible. And so we've really backed ourselves against the wall in 100 years. And in the beginning of that century, we had the potential to have an unbelievable global civilization, but we couldn't change our behavior. It's endemic. And so the solutions to many of the things that people talk about now are beyond a piece of legislation or, I don't know, getting enough people together to march downtown somewhere with signs. It's way past that. We need a paradigm shift of massive in proportions. We need something so powerful that every single person on the planet will be impacted by it. And by powerful, I mean it actually affects their thinking, the way they view the worldview. Right? There are institutes and think tanks already forming and restructuring right now to address that. The New Paradigm Institute, founded by Danny Sheehan, has gotten some initial funding. It will get millions more. The New Paradigm Institute is all about the post-disclosure worldview change. Paradigm Research Group will soon become a 501c3. A little small, it'll be very tiny, but it will be about the post-disclosure worldview change. You've got Soul, which is another think tank put together by Gary Nolan. It's about the post-disclosure worldview change, particularly as it deals with science and technology. Other think tanks are probably already rethinking how they're going to establish internal divisions to deal with this. And more think tanks will form overnight. It'll be think tank city. And what would they be thinking about? how to change the behavior of people and nations in a post-disclosure world when they've all just learned something so profound that there's no way they can just ignore it, that it's going to affect them. How can we tell the stories? How can we create the content that will expand their understanding and expand that worldview change so that we can finally decide to end the 12,000-year model of human existence and make this planet safe, viable, and worthy of being part of some larger group, some, quote, galactic federation. That's what's about to be on the table. And that's why it's hard to answer those questions, because a lot of these problems are endemic to huge forces, and you can't fix them by fixing a couple of things down here while the huge force is still acting on it. You have to change the overall massive dynamic, and we just haven't been able to do it. I mean, we're failing everywhere. I mean, every day you turn on the news and there's another failure, right? You know, it's one of those things. Well, common sense says you shouldn't do that, but they're going to do it. All right. And you're thinking, well, how can we get out of this? I mean, you can't. Not the way we're going. That's why the suicide rate is up. The drug use is massive around the world. Health is being impacted by millions of people. The lifespan in a number of countries is going down. I mean, people are really getting upset, and they should be. All right. But there is a way out, and it's the disclosure event. It's the paradigm shift of all paradigm shifts. And the ETs have been instrumental in bringing this about. It's not just them. We're doing it. We've been working on it. Taken too long, but we've been working on it. But the ETs are absolutely there. They're constantly reminding us, you know, we're here, we're here, we're here, we're here, we're here.
So that
they give messages to us.
me.
They put messages in the minds of contactees and kids in playgrounds. They turn our nuclear weapons off. How much more do they have to do before we realize that they're here? They're here. They're here.
Right.
And so they are part of this. And so disclosure isn't just about us awakening to the things we're doing wrong. It is, in fact, a threshold we need to cross so that the ETs can get more involved. Taking somebody up and doing genetic work on them is not the kind of involvement I'm talking about. I'm talking about formal open involvement. That could be coming. Apparently, the ETs are not thrilled about us launching nuclear weapons at ourselves, though I think they would let it happen. But they're very concerned about us building starships and bringing our nukes out in their territory, which we're almost very close to doing. And so there's a self-serving component to it. I go on here because unless you get up and start looking at things from 30,000 feet, unless you step back from the painting in the museum and take it all in, this stuff will drive you crazy. You have to get this larger picture to be able to understand the elements in there that are bugging you. And that's where activists and futurists and, I don't know, philosophers come in. They try to explain the larger picture in order to achieve a positive outcome, particularly in the case of activists. You must see the larger picture. In the case of civil rights, basically the whole civil rights movement was trying to get people to see the human race from a larger perspective, to see it more as one, to see it from up above and look down and go, wow, you know, everybody's pretty much the same. Everybody has the same needs. Let's start respecting each other. That's literally what the civil rights movement was doing. And if they could get enough people to change their thinking, then they could change the laws. They didn't have to change all the people's thinking. They just needed to have enough of what we'll call a worldview shift amongst a reasonable number of people. And all of a sudden, you had a civil rights change. You had people of color being dealt with differently, with more opportunity. Not there yet, believe me. But still, that's what it is. Activism is always about that. The anti-colonial movement, which is to end colonization by the gifted European powers that just love colonizing nations with like 500 million people and saying, hey, we're running things now, was about what? It was about getting people to think in a larger perspective, to look down on the planet and say, wait a minute, why is it that this little country over here in Northern Europe, this island, right, thinks that it can control a country 50 times bigger with 100 times the population? What possibly could be the logic of that? It doesn't make sense. Look from that larger perspective. And they won. They basically convinced enough people, yeah, this doesn't make sense. It's not appropriate in the larger picture of looking at the planet as a whole. And the British left, and the Portuguese left, and the French left, and colonization basically ended. That's what activism is about. And that's why it can be very difficult to deal with the granular concerns of people in the middle of the activism as it goes forward. They get drawn into that and they lose the focus on the larger picture. And the job of the activist is to keep bringing the focus back, bringing it back, stay the course, get the goal, and then things will change.
So I love a lot of our viewers, the post-disclosure world, right? It's going to have to include the realization, like you were saying, that some people, they're having these abductions and they're real. So some of our viewers, they have been abducted. They have shared their experience. Some have come on the show. We've talked about it, quite a bit. A lot of people, some have come on, have active communication with extraterrestrials. Angela, Lily Starseed, Nova. You have Sue Walker in Albuquerque who talks to the Ponte in the Ciandias. So a lot of our viewers really appreciate your ability to be professional and have a serious tone while discussing the topic and also offering that support to abductees. So a big question that came back is like, so when did Stephen Bassett become convinced of the ET presence? What was that moment that you were convinced? You're like, this is real. I can't go back. I'm convinced.
When I was a teenager, in the very late 1950s, early 1960s. Why? Well, if you look and check, what you find out is that the media has been covering this phenomena from the beginning. The Foo Fighters, there were actually some media coverage of that. And of course, because of the press release put out by the Army Air Force Base, it was covering the Roswell event for a short while, and it's never stopped covering it. Now, have they challenged the government? No. Have they been writing op-eds until recently about we're not being told the truth? No. Did they go digging through the trash cans at the Pentagon, seeing if they can find some wins that pointed to this, so they could, win a Pulitzer Prize? No, they just covered it though. They've covered it. So a perfect example of that was when I was 20. There was an article in Look magazine about the Betty and Barney Hill case. Pretty sure it was 66. Might have been 60. I think it was 66. Whatever. And I read it. And when I read that article, I concluded, well, clearly, Betty and Barney Hill encountered non-humans. They encountered extraterrestrials. It was obvious. And I'm going, well, that's good. But I'd already concluded that before. But because one, I didn't have a religious bias. I didn't have I'm just a kid who likes science fiction. And so I'm reading these things and I'm going, well, clearly that's extraterrestrial. And I can't wait for the government to tell me more. And then I went about being a kid, which is not easy, and doing other stuff. So I knew when I was 17, it was true. Now, it wasn't, did I have the evidence? I mean, did I have like a whole bunch of evidence? No, I didn't. I didn't even know there was a nightcap. I didn't even know about Roswell. The point is that simply common sense is enough to pitch yourself as an ET presence. Common sense is actually pretty important and very less common now, but based on the articles they were written, that was the logical conclusion. And then I just put it aside. Okay, so that's what I do. Now, when I got into the issue in 96, well, guess what? Everything I was hearing, reading, seeing was simply confirming what I knew 30 years earlier. And so that's nice. I mean, I wasn't bragging. I just sort of knew it. I went through life knowing it's real. And I kept waiting for the government to tell us about it. And I'm not the only one like that. but I didn't engage it. If I had had a sighting or if I was a contactee, I might have, but I didn't join any organizations. I just didn't do it. I was too busy basically not being effective. All right. So now when I entered the field in 96, okay, I've read Strieber, I've read Hopkins. Again, I'm not into the issue, but I've read, yeah, they're interesting books. Right. I read Tom Clancy. Right? But the way I got into the field was interesting because in 95, when I decided, everything I've been doing so far is utterly of no value whatsoever, and I've got a limited amount of time to do something that I actually think is important. You better do it now. And I'm making decisions. I'm thinking about it. And one of the books I had just read was Max Abduction, and that was the deal maker. I mean, I had been making some queries, but that was the deal closer. Reading Abduction, and knowing who Mac was, knowing his career, his prestige, and all of that, the Pulitzer Prize and the Harvard education, and he's trying to actually study contactees, and I'm going, well, this thing is happening now. It's really happening now. This is going to be a really big thing, and I was science fiction guy, physics guy, all that kind of stuff, and so for me, the idea of extraterrestrial being confirmed and maybe even engaging them is ultimately cool. And so I said, that's it. And as it happened, as I've said countless times, in the back of Abduction was the address and the phone number for PEER, the group that he was using to study. He formed to study contactees professionally, to write scientific articles. Right. And I called him up. I said, can I volunteer? And I don't know why, but they said yes. And so I began this work by driving across country, getting a little apartment, and hanging out at the Program for Extraordinary Experience, talking to contactees for the first time, meeting them personally, and addressing and coming to understand John Mack's effort to legitimize this issue, which Harvard tried to reject him, and Harvard will have to answer for that one day. But that's my beginning. And so when I knew my time there was up, because I was just a volunteer, and I had to find my own path because it was a little late for me to get a PhD in psychology or anything else, frankly. And I realized something important, that the problem, why I had not heard from the government about the ETs, which I knew were almost certainly here when I was like 16, was because of a political decision made by the government, by Harry Truman. It was a political decision to hold this close until we're ready to release it, embargo it, whatever we want to call it. I don't think they assumed that it would last for 76 years, but I think certainly they want to classify it. And so they classified this issue and put it under wraps in 47 and formalized it in 53. And it was a political decision. It wasn't about science and evidence or anything else. It was about politics. And therefore, the solution to it was not more evidence. It was more politics. And so I said, well, I know something about politics. My family has lived in the Washington area since 1920. Right? I've been in and out of that town, worked there, done that. I know my way around. I said, politics, yes. What could I do? Run for office? Nah. And then it occurred to me while I was sitting in that office in Cambridge, no one had ever registered as a lobbyist on this issue. Why would they? Who would be that stupid? I'll be the first. Packed up my stuff, got there as fast as I could, arrived on July the 4th, registered within a week. All you have to do is just go in line and register. Doesn't cost anything. And you're a lobbyist. And the issues I listed were extraterrestrial presence, sequestered technology, and so forth. And I knew enough about Washington to know that the Washington Post checks every lobbying registration. They have somebody that does that. Everyone. Because at any time, somebody could register as a lobbyist, and that's news. Or it leads to news story. And so if some big lobbying firm suddenly represents the lobby, to represent, I don't know, the king of Saudi Arabia, that's news. And so they're on it. And so they have to check them all. And one day, it wasn't that long, took some months. One day, this registration came across the desk for this guy named Stephen Bassett, Paradigm Research Group. and it's about extraterrestrials. He's lobbying for extraterrestrials, or he's lobbying the government about it. That's interesting. And so they sent a reporter out, interviewed me, put a big article up on the front page of the business section of the Post, which at the time, that's the number 2 page. I mean, the first page is number 1. The most important next page is the business section front page. I have it. I have it up on my site. I don't show it around a lot because the photo is horrible. And my career was launched. I was the first UFO lobbyist, and I was called that.
Bam.
That's it. But I wasn't really a lobbyist per se. I couldn't lobby. In other words, I could register as a lobbyist, but no one was going to talk to me. I was going to go down on the hill and get their attention. They were going to talk to me. And if I became what they call a pester or a buttonholer, where you're constantly hanging around and trying to buttonhole them and asking, look, what about this? What about that? You get a reputation. And then people literally clear the halls when you walk down. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to embarrass the issue. So I couldn't really lobby, though I was a lobbyist. So what I decided to do was I'll lobby the media. I'll push this into the media, right? Using every hook I can, particularly any political hooks. And as a result, there's been nearly 600 articles written about my work and me in one form. I'm in 600 articles. I've helped generate hundreds, if not thousands more. 15,000 articles are linked on my website right now. You can go to Paradigm Research Group, read all 15,000. And there's been many thousands more that have been written. I just can't archive them. I can't get access. I lobbied the media. I knew the media that ultimately would be a deciding factor in 1996. What I didn't know in 1996, though I did have a $3,000 Gateway computer my aunt bought from it, I didn't know that very soon the media wasn't just going to be the Washington Post and the ABC News. It was going to be the World Wide Web. It was going to be emails and bulletin boards, and then social media with 1 and 2 million people registered. And then it was going to be broadcast.com. And then it was going to be podcast, the podcast revolution. I didn't know that. But it is that media, right, which is what we'll call the citizen media, in a sense, that sealed the fate of the truth embargo. If it wasn't for the internet and everything that came afterwards, the New York Times and the Washington Post would still be writing stupid articles about how this doesn't make any sense. But that sealed it. There was no way the truth embargo could sustain itself for too long in the face of a global citizen activist media phenomena. And yet they still eked out 27 more years. And as the internet filled up with websites, as articles were appearing in the late 1990s that after sex or porn, the number 1 most Googled thing was UFOs. And in spite of all that, they managed to hang on to this truth embargo. That's how serious they were about the fact that it just can't handle that truth, which is nonsense and always has been. And one of the reasons that they hung on to it so dearly was not because we couldn't handle the truth. It's because they couldn't handle telling the truth. In other words, the lie had lasted so long. It was such an embarrassment, such a public relations problem. They did not want to have to deal with that. They wanted to just, have it stay until they died. And after they died, tell the truth, tell whatever you want, but not while I'm alive, or at least not while I'm on the job. It was just too bad to deal with. And so it got 27 more years after 1996. And but now it's about to end. It's toast. It's cooked. It's fully baked. All we need to do is take it out of the oven. And the way we take it out of the oven now, after everything that's done, Warner, Rubio, and Schumer need to call the hearing in January in the Senate. They need to pay the airfare and the hotel bill for the many, many witnesses that are dying to testify. I mean, high-level military witnesses with clearance to stuff every bit as powerful as Grush, if not more powerful. Put them on this on oath, in front of a massive global audience for about 1 week, and the president will disclose. It's that simple. That's all it's going to take now. That's the only thing between us and that is the hearing in the Senate. And that's why I launched recently ShiftStorm. It's been out about 4 weeks. Got a website, shiftstorm.com. Don't forget the F. Shiftstorm.com. Org. I'm sorry, shiftstorm.org. I don't have com, just got the org. And it's all about getting the hearings in January. All right. It's not about the UAP disclosure bill. That's done. It's over. It's been watered down, but there's still legislation. It's about the hearing. The new legislation doesn't prevent the hearing from coming. And so here is how it works. Everybody that has an internet and is on Twitter, which is, I don't know, how many billion, 1 billion, 1.5 billion, whatever. I don't care where you are. You're on Twitter. You can tag messages to these 3 senators because they all have Twitter accounts. In fact, every member of Congress has Twitter account, except I think 3. All right. So you tag them a message. They don't have DM. You can't direct message. Tag them a message. So it's at Senator Schumer, at Marco Rubio. We want hearings in January. We love legislation. You're doing a fantastic job. You guys are great. Wonderful, wonderful. We must have hearings. The witnesses want to testify. We want those hearings in January, and you tag it. And that tagged message goes right to their notification box in their Twitter account, which is watched by staffers. And the staffers check it because they want to know what is being said about their boss. When thousands of messages start pouring into that box, and they're starting to see them coming in, all about getting the hearing, and they're gonna call up their boss and say, you need to check the notification box in the Twitter, and the senator is going to go to the notification box and you're going to see all these messages. It's that simple. And I'm telling people, be nice, no epithets, not angry. These are the heroes. They want disclosure. These are the good guys. We just want the hearings. Tell them how wonderful they are. Thank them and say we have to have these hearings in September. So that's part of the shift storm. It's basically a tweet storm. Some people know what a tweet storm is, but it's a Twitter tagging storm. Tag them in these messages. All right. We want 100,000 by the end of the year in each of their Twitter notification boxes. 100,000. That should more than do it. Now, there's also email. They can email. They have email forms, and you can send them emails, but there's a problem. If you are not in their state, if you're not a resident of their state, Florida, New York, or Virginia, then the way the system works, and this is true of the House, you have to fill out the form and you have to put an address in, and if the address is not in their state, it kicks back. The message doesn't go through. I get it. I understand that. It's also the case that the issue involved is not a New York, Florida, or Virginia issue. This is a global issue of massive proportions, right? And they're actually directly impacting it. They literally have the ability to change history here. So it's a little limiting. And so what can I say, right? I mean, if you know, unless something has an address in their state, like, I don't know, Chuck E. Cheese in Virginia or a Walmart in Florida, you know, with an address and a zip code and attached to your message, and it's going to get kicked back. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Whatever. I leave it up to you what you want to do. So that's the email part. We don't suggest phone calls. Don't storm them with phone calls. The odd phone call, yeah, but don't get carried away. The odd phone call is okay, but we don't want to rain phone calls down because that really upsets them and upsets their business. That's the shift storm. It's all up there. All the information you need is right there. The protocols for doing it is right there. I'm spreading it on social media. There is a website, shiftstorm.org, and it's simple. We want hearings in January in front of the Intel Committee, and you are the 3 people that can make it happen. Some people don't understand how Congress works, but the Supreme Court cannot force the Senate Intel Committee to have a hearing. The president cannot force the Senate Intel Committee to have a hearing. The Pentagon cannot force it to have a hearing. The people that are essentially the ones that can call that hearing are the chairman, the ranking member, and I believe also the Senate Majority Leader, and that's Warner, Schumer, and Rubio. Virginia, Florida, New York. And so that's the target. They're the ones that have to get the message. So that's underway right now too. Actually, the ones that can call that hearing are the chairman, the ranking member, and I believe also the Senate Majority Leader, and that's Warner, Schumer, and Rubio, Virginia, Florida, New York. And so that's the target. They're the ones that have to get the message. So that's underway right now too.
So a lot of people had questions specifically because there's this thing that's kind of being thrown around that it's illegal what the politicians are encountering when they're being stonewalled by the intelligence community for this information. So that's been happening, quite a bit. A lot of people have a lot of different questions about that. And that being so, like, do you think official disclosure will happen in 2024? Is that a possibility?
It's not a possibility. It should happen. It should happen. Everything points to it happening. And as far as the Stonewall, no, that's not correct. That's not accurate. Again, one of the problems with the activism, or those that are dabbling in it, is exaggeration for effect. You want people's attention, so you exaggerate. I get it. I try not to do that, right? Because it undermines your fundamental ability to be accepted by people of thoughtful people, and people that consider authenticity very important. The fact is that Congress is getting all kinds of cooperation from the beginning of the initial legislation. The initial legislation called for a classified report and a public report. They got it. They've gotten, I don't know, a number of additional classified reports under the new laws since then, right? And so they're getting information. They're interviewing witnesses and others privately at their discretion all the time. It's been going on for years. The Congress is getting filled up with this stuff. And so the DOD is set up an office within the DOD called Arrow that answers to the Department of Defense and the national security person, the Director of National Intelligence. I mean, my God, that's pretty good. Believe me, you couldn't have had that happen 50 years ago. So there's plenty of cooperation. What happened with respect to this recent kerfuffle is pretty straightforward. And again, you got to look at the bigger picture to understand it. But Grush came forward. He was not, and they knew it could happen, but they were hoping it wouldn't. But he came forward as a whistleblower and essentially upset the time frame and created some problems. I'm not blaming him. I think he's a hero. So he came forward as a whistleblower, gave an interview, was written up in the debrief, and spilled the beans on the non-human tech most of us know we've always had, the crashed vehicles as well as bodies. And boy, that was an issue. That was a problem. In other words, we're working towards disclosure. We're working towards the hearings. We're working towards and doing it in a way that's not going to upset too many apple carts. And he just upset a bunch of apple carts and created a big problem. I think he also helped speed the process up. He helped minimize the chance that they would come up with some way to delay this even more, which they can't afford to do. It's got to be done before the election begins. And so in that sense, he's done a great thing. So he comes up, says, we got non-human tech. Okay. So he clears his testimony with the appropriate entity. There's an entity that if you're a national security clearance, you have to. So he goes to appropriate entity. He goes through everything he can say, and they clear him to say these things. He didn't violate any laws. And when he testified to that hearing, he was cleared to do that. And he also knew that the stuff he was not cleared, he had to claim. Well, not claim, but he had to suggest. We'll speak in private session, and several times he did that. The most notable, and the one I love, is then I think it was Mace, Congresswoman Mace, asked him, and this is so cool. He said, "Mr. Grush, you made it clear that you know that we have non-human technology. Do you happen to know where it's located? Do you happen to know the facilities where the non-human technology is?" And his answer was supposed to be, "I cannot discuss something like that in open session." but I could go into it more in a quote skiff. I don't know if he used skiff, but certainly, which is a secured compartmental information. But what he said was, yes, I do. I know the locations of where the vehicles are, but I can't talk about that in open session. All right. And so what followed, of course, was that the people that put this hearing together wanted to go into that closed session, and they wanted to get that information. Okay. Now remember, Grush not on the script. They weren't ready for that. It was too soon, but there it was. But on the other hand, what are they going to do? Kidnap them? Make them disappear like Navalny? No, we're past that. And so they cleared what he was going to say. He said what he was going to say, and he was not going to get any pushback about that, and except for the anonymous death threats he's been getting. There's nothing you can do about that. But in terms of the government, no. However, when I say that Grush was not on the script, a hearing for a witness like that from a subcommittee of the Oversight Committee of Congress was not on the script. No, that wasn't the path. That wasn't what's supposed to happen. And the reason it happened is that Bassett, who had made the decision to come forward and be very public about this, and had already stated there was an extraterrestrial presence repeatedly, and doing Fox News and News Nation, and he was really way ahead of the issue. And so he was on fire. And so it was he probably that helped convince the chairman of the Oversight Committee to have that subcommittee hold a hearing. He got Luna involved, got Mace involved, and it was not surprisingly, Grush wanted to testify right away. He didn't want to wait for an intel hearing in front of the Senate. He wanted to get it out. He was a whistleblower. That was the point. And so he agreed to the hearing, and they held it, but it wasn't supposed to be that way. And so when they asked for the skiff, essentially, decision was made at the DOD that we do not want these members of a subcommittee of the House to be getting that information from David Grush at this time. And so they denied it. That's not cooperating, but that doesn't mean a stonewall. It just means that they just didn't want to do that. Now, eventually they got a skiff, but by the time they got it, the DOD was able to sort of, I guess, get things set up, get their act together, whatever, so that what transpired in that skiff was not very satisfactory. They got a skiff. But the original denial was because they knew that they were going to go into a skiff with Grush and ask him exactly where all the locations were. And then they were probably going to, get on an airplane and go to those locations like they did in Florida, go to the Army base and want to know what's going on. And we're told, you can't, we're not going to tell you that. And it was just going to get out of hand. So that's kind of the story. It's a backstory there. But they're not going to stop. And they're going to hold another hearing. That's fine. But in the chaos of that post-Grush situation, right, which began on June the 5th and finally culminated on July 26th, which is essentially 41 days later, 51 days later. And in between that, between the hearing in front of the House subcommittee, is when Schumer comes out with this huge new addition to the UAP legislation, right? And the reason he did that was because of Grush. I don't think he comes forward with a legislation of that severity if it wasn't for Grush, because it was a lot. It was clearly going to force the action. It was going to create pushback. He knew that, but he had an impossible situation. Grush had already stated in front of a camera, it was in an article in the debrief, that there's non-human tech. He then goes in front of and he plans to go in front of a committee eventually, almost certainly, but he's put it out there. It's now in play, and it's not being denied. The Pentagon's not putting out giant press releases saying Grush is lying. No. Now, there was some pushback, but the usual stuff. Somebody released some of his medical records, class act, and Sean Kirkpatrick wrote a fairly nasty letter about it, but that's because Sean was in an impossible position. When Grush comes out with that, Arrow was not ready to deal with that, and Sean Kirkpatrick knew And so he kind of created a real problem for Dr. Kirkpatrick, and Dr. Kirkpatrick got upset, sent a letter. That's about it. And so now it's out there. It's out there. Now what's Schumer going to do? What's the Intel committee going to do? Right? They know that now, and articles are being written. There's plenty of them. Go to my website. Scores of articles were written about the non-human technology that we have that's not being denied, and they still haven't had a hearing yet. And so it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? And Schumer made a bold decision. Here is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to put the Senate Intel Committee in a position where they're going to have to somehow handle this. I'm one of the most powerful men in Congress. I'm one of the gang of 8. I'll take care of it. Take the load off of them. And so he announces that he and Mike Rounds, who's not on the Senate Intel Committee, he's Armed Services, have put together a substantial tranche of legislation, and here it is. And it went right up on the site. And what did it address most importantly? Non-human technology. What Grush had put out there. And he's saying we will legislate eminent domain over the non-human technology, which is mentioned in that bill 25 times. And so what he did there is he confirms Grush, he shuts the door on any more at least formal disparagement of him. Secondly, he confirms to the Senate that I'm with you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on your side. I'm there for you. It's okay. I'm stepping in. All right. And he puts it into the bill and says the United States government owns it, and we have subpoena power and all of this. In other words, he's basically saying, yeah, we have that tech. Yes, I understand that. Yes, it's important. And we're going to really address it in a very comprehensive way. And even we're going to declare ownership, which sent a message to the world. Every single person in the government, I think, probably have read something about that bill. Everybody in the deepest USAP programs have read something about that bill. If they haven't read the bill, everybody in the DOD and the CIA, they get newspapers and internet too. And so he sent that message to the whole military intelligence complex. And he backed up Grush. And he got the blowback I think he expected. But he knew he couldn't lose. I mean, this is chess. This is three-dimensional chess here. He knew he couldn't lose. He knew if they didn't push back, that legislation was going to pass, and everything was in place to hold the hearings and get this done. But if they did push back, it would mitigate the bill. It would reduce some of its influence. It couldn't stop hearings, but they would have to out themselves. To push back against this bill is to literally authenticate it. If you are talking national security, if you are talking government contractors and shareholder interest or whatever the hell, if it has to do with non-human tech, you have just confirmed the bill. And so it's win-win. It's win-win for him. It's win-win for the Senate. And then he goes in front of the Senate, or I say in front of the Senate, on the Senate floor, along with Rounds, and he speaks publicly, and I'm going to get that video out. He speaks publicly about his disappointment that the bill was not passed as it was. He mentions that pretty much the pushback came from Republicans, which is a politicization thing. First time it's happened, as far as I know. But he felt it was time to do that. He did it. But then he was pretty conciliatory, right? But he let it be known that, like, well, we really wanted all of that, but we got this. But still, and I think he acknowledged that the bill that was passed still has the essence of the original bill. And the essence says we need to get the stuff out of the secret world into the National Archives. We need to be super careful about it. We don't want to have a lot of hassle with people about it. We want to control the process. So we're stripping out your enforcement stuff, but ultimately that's what we want, and that's okay. And so that is the way to explain the issue of. That's my answer to the simple question that why is there a stonewall on the part of the national security state? There isn't. It's not a stonewall. It is a chess game being played. It's four-player chess. You can buy that game, by the way. It's out there. Four people play. It's a bigger board, but 4 people play, and everybody's got the same set of pieces. And now you're playing against each other. You got 4. It's really very complicated, but it's 4-person chess. Okay, this has been all along a 4-person chess game. Who are the 4 players? The Congress, the military intelligence complex fronted by the DoD, the White House, which is not making many moves at all. It's just kind of laying low. And then the public and the media world. The journalism world and the public are together as one player. And these are the 4 players playing this game. And yeah, it's really, really complicated. And I'm doing my best to follow it and try to explain it. But believe me, it's still more than I can fully grasp. But that's what's going on.
I have a question.
Yes.
With your expertise, and it's something that's coming up quite a bit on Twitter when all these laws were passing. There was something about how now some of this information about the technology and the extraterrestrial bodies is under a similar umbrella as the JFK files, that we might have to wait. What's going on with that regard? A lot of people have questions about that.
Look, again, yeah. Okay. Let's take the big picture view. There was a process put in play to eventually get the JFK files out. And this model is what Schumer was using. All right. And I haven't really looked into the JFK file disclosure model. I knew there was one, and I know people didn't like it. But the point is, I didn't look into it. But I saw what was in that bill. And what was in that bill was perfectly fine. But where it gets muddled is this. The JFK assassination and the issue of an extraterrestrial presence are 2 very, very, very different things, right? They're not, it's apples and oranges. And so point number 1, the death of JFK was a singular event and probably generated more conspiracy perspectives than any other event that I'm aware of. I don't think anything... 9/11 has created a number of conspiracy things, but doesn't compare to JFK. So it generated this massive a number of threads of conspiracies because it was an assassination, and a lot of people didn't like JFK, and so it's extremely negative, extremely nasty, and a lot of people's careers were on the line right out the get-go, and so it just got. It's a mess. Okay. And people want to know the truth. And no, the government did not handle it well. They didn't handle 9/11 well. In fact, they don't handle much of anything well, frankly. And so it got messy. So they passed this legislation that would bring information forward in a certain way. And given the fact that there's 27 different theories out there about how JFK was assassinated, and everyone thinks they're right, and obviously all 27 cannot be right, there was no way that there was going to be satisfaction with the process. There was no way that everybody's going to be, okay, this is great. And so it just, and for those that thought that this model of information coming forward was going to settle it once and for all, they just underestimated just what a mess the history of this assassination was. And so it's not been that effective, possibly because there's still some entities within our government that absolutely never want the truth of the assassination out. And they have a better shot at that than the people regarding the ET issue. And what do I mean?
Good. I hate to interrupt you like that. I could talk to you for hours and hours for sure, but I know, but I want to do pre-record just so I can get in depth. The chat can be very sometimes distracting.
Pick a question that you think has
for the viewers and what I see, what they feel, and the things that they've experienced, and just what a strong advocate you are. Everybody just kind of goes towards that light because there's not that light around them, Steve. Like the abductees, those people, we all need, I do, everyone needs that light of confirmation from somebody who's at the forefront just doing it. And the backlash can be painful. The backlash from your friends, from your family, from the people around you.
I'm
from
fine.
people that
I am fine. I'm past that. I get virtually no backlash. I mean, we are in calm waters now. There's the odd thing here and the odd thing there. There are a couple people in this field right now that are getting some serious issues. Why, I'm not clear. We're watching that, but trust me, it's not 10, 20 years ago. This issue is now out there. It's almost acknowledged. We're just going through the motions of getting it formally acknowledged. So we're fine. Now, as far as contactees that are still in the closet, yeah. If you're still in the closet on the contactee issue, you're not comfortable, right? And contactees are more likely to get a stupid remark tossed at them than I do. And so, yeah, there are still people that can get, but it's not me. I'm fine, right? I've never been better. So, but you're right. One of the roles of activism is to constantly remind people they're going to win. You cannot lead a movement constantly reminding people the odds are against you. Meaning, we might get it, but the odds are probably not. No. It's just the nature of government, the nature of human nature. When it comes to what is right, and when it comes to the arc of justice, and this is, by the way, a justice issue, the way you get there is you constantly reinforce the fact that you will get there. You will get there. And generally that's true. That's true. And if the issue is big enough people are involved, it's absolutely a certainty. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. And well, that's not in the control of the activists. There's too many variables. But the fundamental thing about activism is that telling people you will get there. And when I say it, I'm not making it up. It's not a ruse. It's absolutely true. I'm absolutely positive we're going to get disclosure. It's inevitable. I'm increasingly convinced we're going to get it very soon. And I see a very logical reason why, and I see the path to why we cannot get it in January, early February. And so I'm saying that with high confidence, right? But look, all it takes is one idiot to fire off a tactical nuke shell in Ukraine and blow up a little village with a nuclear weapon, and this whole business is going to be shoved to the side. It is, guarantee it. Or an attack on Taiwan by China. It's all being set aside. So there's nothing is certain in this world. Nothing is guaranteed. But when it comes to the bigger picture, the idea that the entire Western world can continue on indefinitely, denying that what is literally flying overhead every day is nothing to worry about or nothing even there at all, is of course absurd. Right? So right there, it absolutely cannot last. We know that. It's obvious, but people need to be reminded of that. And particularly when the government is this intransigent. There is, and we'll close with this, if you don't mind. There is a very well-known moment in the civil rights movement, not long before the Civil Rights Act was passed. I mean, it was pretty close to and I'll research it and get the exact time frame. But the Civil Rights Act of '64 is going to be passed, and leading up to it, pretty close to it, Governor Wallace goes out and gives a speech down in Alabama, typical speech, and he does his thing, makes his point, and he finishes up by saying, "Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." And shortly after that, they passed the Civil Rights Act, ending segregation. And so again, this idea that injustice is permanent is always a mistake, right? And the more activist involvement, the more certain that arc of justice will land. The arc of justice, as King said, the arc of justice is long, but the arc of the universe is long, but it tends toward justice, right? And then the arc of justice is also long, but not as long as the arc of the universe, and it needs to be short. In other words, we need to get better at the activist arcs that we engage in to reform. And there's no law that says it has to stretch out for like 2 generations or 5 generations. I mean, you just sort of get your society into this idea of like, hey, you get an activist thing going. If it's right, let's get on it. Let's get it done. Let's move forward. Right. Not let's stretch it out for about 80 years. We don't want to rush into this, and we can go that way. This is a 75-year activist movement that has only been truly engaged since 96. But the actual activism of one sort or another is now 75 years on. That's not unusually long, and so we'll succeed here hopefully within the next few months.
God bless you, Stephen Bassett. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for being episode 1 of the Nikki Starchild Show. I think the public's going to be impressed, and you are absolutely amazing. So with that, I just want to say super thank you, Stephen Bassett, and I'm just going to put you at the backstage and just end it out. Thank you so much. All right, guys, there you have it. So definitely go check out the latest from PRG, the Shift Storm project, pushing the UAP hearings before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in January. Thank you so much for coming tonight, you guys. Exciting that we can do a pre-record in the prime time. And you guys stay safe and continue to be curious. Peace.